Voters in our region are looking to cast their vote in the upcoming general election. Northwest Public Broadcasting and the League of Women Voters of Benton and Franklin counties want you to know the candidates. Recorded at the Washington State University Tri-Cities campus, this is Vote 2022.
Good evening and welcome to this virtual candidate forum. My name is Ravine Jimenez. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Benton and Franklin counties. The League is a nonpartisan organization that neither supports nor opposes candidates. In presenting these forums, it is our goal to provide opportunities for voters to become better informed about the people who are running for public office. The 2022 general election candidate forums have been pre-recorded in person by Northwest Public Broadcasting at the WSU Tri-City studio rather than on Zoom. They will also now be available at nwpb.org/vote2022 through our additional partners, the Columbia Basin Badger Club, the cities of Richland and Pasco, and of course the League's website and Facebook page. Please go to lwv/bf.org to see the complete information for accessing any and all of these sites through November 8th, 2022. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator, Matt Loveless from Murrow College of Communication, WSU Pullman. Please welcome Matt.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to do this with you again as we take a look at a number of races on the ballots in the Tri-Cities this election season. Northwest Public Broadcasting's Vote 2022 series will include 11 debates with 22 candidates who have agreed to the League's format. What we want to do is give voters out there a little more insight into these candidates and where they stand on some major issues affecting the region and the state. Now, how today's program will work over the next hour will feature 3 races, all 4 positions in the state's 8th legislative district. With that, here's how timing will work. All candidates here will have 90-second opening statements. We'll then follow with a pretty quick back and forth, 4 questions from each race, and a 90-second response time for those as well. Now, as moderator, within the time parameters of this program, I do reserve the right to include more questions or, time permitting, allow for some closing statements. We'll keep an eye on the clock there. For now, those are not part of the schedule, but of course, we will all do our best to stay on time and on topic for the sake of fairness and transparency. Now, as we begin our program in a race for the state Senate seat in the 8th Legislative District, our candidates who came out of the primary are Ronni Batchelor, running as an independent, and current 8th District Representative Matt Boehnke. Ms. Batchelor, Mr. Boehnke, thank you so much for taking some time out for us today.
Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate it. Now, we are here at our studio at the WSU Tri-Cities campus, and as I just stated in that rules overview, we'll begin with an opening statement from each of you. Ms. Batchelor, the time is yours for a 90-second opening statement.
My name is Ronni Batchelor. I'm a community member. I work in crisis services, and I've done outreach in the community for many years, helping people find housing, getting stabilized, and getting back into their life so that they could be successful. I see a lot of things in our community, and it seems that it's not meeting the needs of the people that are in our community that are most vulnerable. And I'm running because I support people that are homeless. I support health. I support mental health. I think that too many times and too often we go without those things because we can't afford them. Just wanting to help in our community the best I can, and I think that this position will give me that opportunity to do more.
All right, Ms. Batchelor, thank you very much. Mr. Boehnke, your time now for a 90-second opening statement.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to WSU for hosting this and the League of Women Voters for having us here today. It means a lot to have the freedom and accountability to the voters of the 8th District and allowing us to get to know each other online and hopefully in person very soon. So thanks for doing that. My name is Matt Boehnke. I'm currently the representative for the 8th Legislative District in the House, running for the State Senate and asking for your vote. Today we're going to discuss a lot of issues. My primary concerns are our community safety and our areas throughout the state that we've seen a rise in crime, our economic stability with the rise in inflation, but also here particularly at WSU, we have the energy sector of the world and we can be the prime community to lead that effort into a clean economy that we can see not only now but into the future. We can gather that to where we can meet at a crossroads, but also bridge the gap of a lot of people's interests, the discussions, do it professionally and civil, and in a way that we can showcase this in a manner of not only today but into the future of discussing ideas to create a better generation, a better place for each and every one of us. Looking forward to this conversation today, and thanks for having us, Matt.
All right, thank you both very much for those opening statements. We have a few questions to get to, and we might hit on some topics we discussed just now, but let's get to the first of those questions brought to us by the League of Women Voters here, Benton and Franklin counties. And really the first topic is on the topic of elections, and we'll provide some context for our viewers here real quick. The Benton County Auditor's Office invited the League of Women Voters to participate in the paid pilot program, along with representatives from the Republican and Democratic parties to watch the ballot counting process during the 2022 election season. Now, if elected, do you plan to introduce or support any specific legislation that regards election security in our state? And if so, please describe it. Ms. Batchelor, you're up first.
I honestly think that we do a really good job at keeping our elections secure and safe. I do. I know people down there, and I know that they're very meticulous about how they do their work, and I know that there's pieces to that work that can be improved. I have not had the opportunity to go over and talk with them and be there for the ballot counting specifically, but definitely if there's holes that need to be patched or holes that need to be filled, and made note that these are some areas that we need to beef up, then that's what we'll do.
All right. Excellent. Thank you very much. And Mr. Boehnke, the same question goes to you, and really it all boils down to just, legislation, trust in the election process. Where do you stand, and what would legislation look like?
Well, I appreciate the question, Matt, because it's been a hot topic over the last several years, especially the last two elections. If we don't have a trustworthy election cycle and process that people can understand their vote and their voice really counts in this system, then a lot of people are apathetic. They don't want to join in. They think their vote counts, and they won't show up at the polls. We want each and every one of the people out there listening to make sure they get out to vote, to educate themselves, inform on the candidates that are out there. Some of the specific legislation I've seen and have worked with Secretary of State Wyman on the election process, whether it's computerized or not, having a background in technology as a cybersecurity expert, we try to get into ensuring that the data that is collected is accurate. It's not manipulated in any way. It is certified to be confidential, and the integrity of that data is moved from the counties to the state. I'll also add, the counties are very open and honest about the touring of the process. I had a chance to go out there, Brenda Chilton and her team here locally in Benton and in Franklin County as well. They've been open and honest, so if the public has any questions about these, feel free to get out yourself. I had a chance to do that tour. It means a lot to go understand it from the ground level, meet the people who are actually counting the ballots, understanding that process and what we can do to improve it. Along with some of the stuff at the Secretary of State's office, we're looking at not only computerized, but watching what we can validate, verify. I would run a couple bills to see what technologies we can do, maybe a watermark on the actual ballot. If we mail out, we can see that. We can also use some kind of crypto tag. We've seen that in RFID tags and some other technology areas that would actually just improve some of the technologies into our system.
All right, Mr. Boehnke, thank you very much. Now, their second question, and when we last spoke in the forums of during the primary season, it really had just been a few days since the Supreme Court had overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, since then, 17 states have restricted or banned abortion outright, including our neighbors in Idaho. So the question for you, Mr. Boehnke, you go first here as a hopeful state representative. What legislative policies do you or would you support regarding abortion here in the state of Washington?
I would look at every option we can to protect and give every individual that's going through this critical decision the best services, the support they need for them and the families that are really impacted by this. This is a hot topic that concerns each and every one of us. Male, female, anybody who's having this discussion needs to know that we have educational systems in place. We have services with subject matter experts. I would argue some of the top leading experts in the nation are right here in the state of Washington, that we need to reach out and provide that outreach to every family that's going through this. I would continue to support that. We've had legislation there, working on budget committees, things in the past to continue to offer that support to everybody who is working on and even contemplating what options are out there available, where they can go, what can they do at different times of day, especially at the nights and weekends. We've heard the scary stories of families that are sit in the dark in alleys, backyards, different places around our communities. We really need to reach out and bring people back together. And that's the goal coming out of COVID. We've been separated. We've been divisive. We've heard toxic rhetoric online. And this is another step forward that we need to really be compassionate and understanding that people are concerned about this and want to move forward in the best way we can for all Washingtonians.
Mr. Boehnke, thank you very much. Ms. Batchelor, same question to you, and I'll restate it here. Any piece of legislation or a legislative policy that you might support when it comes to abortion in the state?
Well, in my own personal experience and many women that I know that have had to go through this, it's a very difficult decision. And, you know, though I made the decision to keep my child, there's others that couldn't make that decision because of the welfare of themselves, the situation they were in personally. And I think the empathy goes a long way. And I think having those supports, I mean, when you have people tumbling and falling apart, you know, that support piece is the biggest factor, and giving them the opportunity to work with their doctor and it be between the doctor and the patient and the families that are going through this.
And I guess with about 45 seconds left, I would ask, you know, the second part of the question is what kind of legislative policies might you support? What might that look like from a state Senate perspective?
So, you know, everybody, this is such a challenging subject, and weighing that information and finding the right legislation to push forward is going to be key. So, you know, I can't say that I'm going to push legislation, but definitely this is a really big topic. And I think that people need to be heard first, and we need to do the right thing by our communities.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It is a heavy topic, of course, and one that's gained a lot of more conversation here in the last few months, certainly. Well, our next question takes a look at the topic of immigration and the type of legislation you would support. We are dealing with a few hypotheticals here, certainly today, but in the process of getting to that, the League does ask that you describe your knowledge of E-Verify, and if you could elaborate on any changes you would recommend to that process. Ms. Batchelor, you're first here.
I really don't know much about this, so I don't have much to say on it. Once I learn more about it, then I can. But
well, let's stick with part one of the question then, when just asking about immigration and handling that, especially in this region of our country, of our state.
Well, I know that there's processes in place, and I think that people find it difficult to get through those processes. Good people and people that are working and that are contributing to our communities across the state. I think giving a pathway to citizenship, pathway to get their green card, we need to do that. I can tell you that our workforce is dwindling, and when you have people that are here, that are working, that want to work, we need to fill those positions, and some of these people that are here already have education behind them and they're working fields. So I think that we should make it a little bit easier, always protecting our borders, always protecting our citizens, but making sure those that want to be here and work here, that are here, that we give opportunity for them to get legal and be legal here in our communities. And I would support legislation for that.
All right, Ms. Batchelor, thank you very much. And I'll sort of restate the question for you, Mr. Boehnke. The type of legislation you would support on the topic of immigration, but as I said, the League would like you to describe your knowledge of E-Verify and any changes you might make to that process.
Sure, and I appreciate the question because it is another hot topic. E-Verify is basically a program that we can verify individuals who come to our country to work in our state and work with our federal agencies throughout there. whether it's doing a background check, it's simply put that it's a way we can validate individuals out here. We do have a workforce problem. I do believe in strong borders, having defended our country for 22 years in service around the globe to almost 40 states and countries around the globe, multiple different combat operations. Immigration has been one of the best parts of this country and made us who we are. We've been a leader for years, and we're getting back to that stage of being a superpower, and we need to act like it. We need to understand that we can work with other countries to bring in their poor, the needy, as we see at Ellis Island in the Statue of Liberty, to showcase that we have an open opportunity to extend the will of the freedoms of this great country to others. And when you serve in other countries, you see that, and you're walking in the communities. Most people have the similar areas like we. They just want to take care of their family, put a roof over their head, and really have a job at the end of the day. And most of them, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, other places I've been in Asia as well, if you talk to individuals, that 99% of everybody is just wanting to be the best they can be, to work the way they can, and have the freedoms and rights. And when you're talking to them, they just want to be Americans. They see what we have, and we have such a great prosperity country that is still that shining light on the hill that people want to come to. Let's invite it, let's work that. Let's be leaders again and showcase how we can come together and use that in the national stage, and we will at the state level.
All right, Mr. Boehnke, thank you very much. And then we have one more question here. I mentioned this would go fast, and our fourth and final question has to do with climate change, another topic that is on the minds of plenty of people around the world and around the country. We'd like you to describe elements of what a climate change plan might look like, whether that be to drive down greenhouse gas emissions, increase the removal of CO2. We're going to start with Mr. Boehnke here, and how does Washington State, one, do that, and two, be maybe a leader on that front?
Sure. I helped work the CETA plan. If you didn't know, we passed it a couple years ago in the State House and through the Senate. It's the Clean Energy Transformation Act. We had a lot of amendments on there, which I was sad that didn't get accepted by the majority party. And in a bipartisan effort, actually working together from the state levels, that we can lead the nation in energy. I do believe we can work. And what we've coined the phrase from Dr. Haynes here, even at Washington State University, has mentioned, quote, we're looking at clean up to clean energy is our mantra. And that's what I want to take to the state to lead in. And as we move the state to a little bit more red seats and take the majority in the Senate, and we will, and it'll be opportunity to be a chair of the Energy and Environment Committee up there, to work on energy to where we can leverage Pacific Northwest National Laboratories, the smartest people in the world, doing great work that I think is a benefit to our community, showcase the extras that we're working on in the hydrogen sector. We're going after a hydrogen hub. There's 4 in competition with billions of dollars to set us up of what the Tri-Cities and the 8th District is going to look like over the next 20 years. Increasing the opportunity for technology in capturing the carbon out of the air, carbon sequestration. We can work with the environment to showcase how we can, and I have seen HB 1170 when I passed a bipartisan effort and the best manufacturing bill to increase, to locate and showcase manufacturing with women, minority leadership in those communities right here in the 8th District. And we're going to lead from the front throughout all these different sectors for a clean energy future.
Mr. Boehnke, thank you very much. Ms. Batchelor, turn that question over to you. You know, I can keep it broad too, just talking about how would you address climate issues here in the state and help Washington State be a leader on that front?
Well, I think that in terms of Washington State, I think that the Tri-Cities has a better understanding of that clean energy because it's been being done here already. And what I don't want to see is the grid to fail. And so I think that in perspective of Texas losing their grid during a time of a storm that came through, I don't want to see that for our people, you know, here. And I would like to see our grid strengthened. I think that with those modules going out, with the things that we already have planned, we can build on that and we can become the leader in the 8th Legislative District in reducing those carbon emissions, greenhouse gases. And part of that is also in our farming and how we farm. You know, the way that we transport, you know, those things can change. And I think that legislation should be made according to ability in different sectors within the state, so that we can emphasize that we're doing it right and we're doing it strong, and we are a leader, because Washington State has been a leader in many areas, and other states look to us as being the experts. So.
Right. All right, Ms. Batchelor, thank you very much. And you know what? I think we banked a little bit of time here. I want to get some more information out of both of you. I'm going to ask our timers, let's load up a 30-second clock. And I know we didn't necessarily talk about closing statements, but maybe I'll frame this in a way of saying, what is a topic you wanted to touch on here today that we didn't in our short Q&A session? Ms. Batchelor, we'll start 30 seconds with you as sort of a closing statement.
I think that in the way that I approach our community, it's housing, health, welfare, vitality. I think that needs to be taken care of. That's been amiss for a while. Some of the things that I would like to do are move our crisis services into emergency services and cross-connect doctors with mental health, so that our police officers aren't out on the street and tied up with people with mental illness. They have a drop point where they can bring them, they can get the help they need, and they can get the supports they need in that place, whether it's going to be at the Richland Hospital, the Pasco Hospital,
right,
or over in Kennewick. And there's just a lot of money put there, and we could save a whole lot of money there.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there. It went past our time, but I want to give Mr. Boehnke a chance to have 30 seconds as a closing statement of his own.
Sure, I think that one of the bigger areas is the impact coming out of COVID and the economic development. We've seen the shutdown, the impacts on small business, women, minority businesses that are so prevalent, the backbone of our economy. We got to get them back. We got to get them revitalized. We got to do that. Also, I guess I would add in a twist, cybersecurity. Still going to be a big issue. I think we can lead from the state. We have a lot of technology in the top 20, top 100 companies in the state, Microsoft, Boeing, all these leading industries. So why can't we leverage that into the workforce of our future? And that's the other big piece that I can tailor into the community safety, the inflation, some of that economic stuff needs to be in there as well.
Right. All right. Well, Mr. Boehnke, Ms. Batchelor, thank you so much for being here. It was said it would go quickly, and it certainly did. It's a lightning round. But we appreciate you both being here, candidates for the Senate seat in Washington's 8th Legislative District. And thank you for letting us find out a little bit more about you. Our next race moves to the 8th House of Representatives. 2 contested seats on that ballot. We'll start with position 1. Joining me now are Stephanie Barnard and Patrick Gettner. Thank you both for joining us here today. We really appreciate it. Now, we explained our format as is our standard. We will start with opening statements. Mrs. Barnard, your 90 seconds begin now.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. Big NPR fan. Listen and appreciate the work that you do. I was born in the Seattle area and moved to the Tri-Cities about 30 years ago. So I do consider myself a Tri-Citian. I don't know where that break is, but I do consider myself a Tri-Citian. Put down roots here. I'm the mother of 6, 2 that are still in high school, and a boy and a girl, a freshman, sophomore, and a senior. So it's good life. I work right now at the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce. I was the Government and Regional Affairs Director, which provided the policy and advocacy for businesses in our local community. And now I am the Strategic Projects Director as well as the Business Resource Navigator there. So that is what, that's my role there at the Chamber, but I've also done a lot of community work as well. I was the founder and executive director of the Angels Network, which provided car seats to newborn babies and their families in this community, those that were in unrepresented and communities around the Tri-Cities.
Well, thank you very much. Nice to meet you. And Mr. Patrick Gettner is here as well. You have 90 seconds for your opening statement, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Patrick Gettner. I'm running for position 1, Legislative District 8. This is a position that's been held by Brad Clippert for some 14 years. I'd like to thank him for his service. I don't plan to replace Brad. I can only succeed him. But anyway, I'm a constitutional common sense constitutionalist. As your legislator, I will fight for your individual freedoms, for your economic opportunities. I will fight for your families, your flag, your future. Our future here in this area is energy, and we need to take advantage of all our science and technology that we have here. I will also seek to preserve your rights as far as gun rights, rights concerning your dams, your borders, your support veterans, and also support law enforcement. I would appreciate your vote on November the 8th.
All right, Mr. Gettner, thank you very much. We'll get to a round of questions brought to us by the League of Women Voters. We have 4 planned questions now, all submitted by the League, and we appreciate their time doing a lot of research to find out what the people in your community want to find out about. Now, the first question looks into House Bill 2303. As we talk about rights, we're talking about tenants' rights here. That may come before the legislature again in 2023. That would allow a tenant to petition a superior court for a hearing to make their case if they don't get all or part of their deposit back, rather than having to go to small claims court. So when it comes to HB 2303, would you support this bill, and why or why not? Ms. Barnard, we begin our line of questioning with you.
Well, I can't, well, the one thing that I won't do is say whether I would support it or not support it without reading the fine print. If there's one thing I have learned from my work with the Washington State Legislature, is that sometimes those key words and those key definitions, they're really important. So without having studied that bill and looking at both sides of the issue, I would not be quick to make a recommendation or support or opposition either way. So, and I know that's kind of the safe play right now because we are in this forum, but it's true. You sometimes there are parts of those bills that really don't fall or won't benefit the tenants the way that we think they might. So if we can look at that issue and say, so these tenants, if they want to get their safety deposit back, there are requirements that the landlord may have set forth as far as things that have happened in the apartment, or the reasons why they're being evicted or not evicted. Maybe they're just leaving because they found a better place that's less expensive, but yet anything could happen. Maybe there's a door that came off the hinges that needs to be fixed. I mean, there's so many reasons why. But if the landlord did their job and really laid that out before the deposit was given, then there should be protections already baked in. So to have that opportunity for tenants to have this private right of action, if that's what this is referring to, that already exists. You can sue anyone for anything that you want to. It just costs you a fee. I'm not sure we have to have a baked-in private right of action there. So until I saw the bill itself in all of its context, I wouldn't go there. All right,
we ran out of time there, but I want to move the question on to Mr. Gettner. Would you support House Bill 2303 as you understand?
Well, I also would like to look at it more thoroughly to see exactly what is involved. On the face of it, it looks like a court of last resort type resolution to an issue. I've been in that particular predicament, where a landlord would not give me back my deposit. I did not take it into court, either small claims or otherwise, but sometimes there may be a reason warranted to do so. So I would probably, on the face of it, support it at this time.
All right, Mr. Gettner, thank you very much. Now, a lot of questions are a little bit hypothetical here, so I appreciate the attempts, but I do want to ask this time about what legislation might look like if you were to introduce it. And this one talks about legislation aimed at protecting marginalized groups in our community. Would you introduce or feel the need to introduce or support a legislative policy that helps these groups, such as LGBTQ community, people of color, women and children living in poverty? And once again, why or why not? Mr. Gettner, that question starts with you, sir.
Well, first of all, before we start throwing money to try to come up with a solution, we need to find out what the root causes are so we can adequately address the issue with a proper solution. So I would again want to study the root causes, find out why people are in the predicament they are, and if there's solutions in the legislature that we can put forth, I would certainly pursue those.
All right. Lots of time left, but good with your answer?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. I want you to be able to use as much clock as you want to, so I don't want to take any of that time away from you. Ms. Barnard, we'll move to you for that same question.
I absolutely do think that there are ways we can help the underrepresented communities. We already do in some respects, but there are gaps. That's one of the reasons I started the Angels Network, because I noticed that as parents left the hospitals with their newborns, they weren't necessarily prepared for transporting their baby in a safe manner. And because they didn't understand, number one, the laws of our country and the state of Washington, and they were also unfamiliar with how to use a car seat, or they didn't realize it was needed to be rear facing. And there's so many barriers there that we really do need to take those into account and need to provide what's necessary in order to fill those needs and to lessen those barriers so that progress can be made. And I do support actions that well, I guess it depends on the bill again, but on the just not knowing the content, I definitely feel like there's a lot of work that we can do. And what my role at the chamber is right now, in fact, is to reach out in trying to create a position where we can have effective outreach to those communities that don't have it at this current time.
Well, and let me sort of move on to question 3 here, which maybe ties into a little bit of what you talk about, and that's going to bounce right back to you. You get to start on this next question. And it does have certain relevance in this district. What kind of legislation would you support on immigration? And the league has asked that in your answer, if you could, include your knowledge of the E-Verify system and if there are any changes you might recommend to that process. That's kind of a 3-part question.
Sure. So we need workers, we need laborers, we need everybody. And the E-Verify program, I believe, it definitely could use some tweaks. It needs to be improved, but I believe the way to improve that is with increased flexibility. And E-Verify, I think a green card should be stapled to everyone's diploma when they graduate from college. That is what we need. We need those individuals to really have an opportunity to make a difference here in our country. So E-Verify, while valuable, I believe there's definitely some room for flexibility and some changes there to improve the circumstances for those that are seeking to work and live in this country.
All right, Ms. Barnard, thank you very much. And Mr. Gettner, I'll turn that question to you as well. What does an immigration policy written by Patrick Gettner look like in the Washington State Legislature, and your knowledge of the E-Verify system as well?
Well, really, this is a federal question, and it may come down to the state legislatures, but certainly we are letting 1 million people in per year legally. We're being invaded now by over 4 million, they estimate, by the end of this year, illegally. So I really believe in vetting these people as thoroughly as possible. I'm sure the Border Patrol is doing that. The issue to me is, can we afford this? We've got people in this country that come in illegally, doing good things and good work and bringing talents and skills that we need. But can we afford to be the welfare system for the whole world?
All right, Mr. Gittner, thank you very much. And now the last question, I won't say last question, we might have some extra time here, and I want to get as much time as I can with our candidates here, but this is a topic we've seen here and really in a number of states, certainly in a state where a large city holds a lot of political sway. So do you believe that Eastern Washington should try to break off from Washington State, become a part of Idaho, and is there a feasible path to this in your mind? And maybe this is more of a philosophical question, Mr. Gittner, but why or why not?
Well, certainly there's sentiment leaning toward doing that. I don't see how it's possible under our present U.S. Constitution or our state constitution. It would have to be a kind of a groundswell of constitutional amendments to make this possible. In the meantime, it would be up to the people in these areas as to which government they want to have, whether they want to consolidate with western Idaho or all of Idaho, northern California, and other conservative areas to maybe address those issues that apply to us the most.
All right, Mr. Gittner, thank you very much. And Ms. Barnard, same question to you. Once again, I say it's sort of a philosophical question. Maybe we can discuss the feasibility of it. But what do you think of this topic of seceding from the western part of the state?
I think that would be a mistake. I don't see the feasibility of it, but I also philosophically, I disagree with the premise of splitting a state in two. I think we can work together, and I think we should work together. There are definitely some obstacles that need to be overcome, some division that needs to be worked on between the parties. I feel that the lines of communication need to be opened, and we've got to be able to sit down and have a civil conversation about things that we may or may not disagree on, but policy can be led through civil discourse. And if we have a place at the table, I think we need to work towards that rather than greater division.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Now, I do want to, like I said, spend some more time with you. So I'm going to add time for some closing statements. Let's reset the clock at a minute. And I wonder within the context of closing statements, really, what is the biggest challenge ahead for the 8th District? It kind of gives you an opportunity to sort of formulate your own question. Ms. Barnard, I'll have you go first here.
The biggest challenge right now I see is affordability. One of the things that I've done in my work at the Chamber is meet with small business owners. And during the pandemic, when there was closures, there was and still is great struggle. And most of those come from those businesses with owners that have barriers. Affordability is key. We can't afford the price of food. We can't afford housing. We can't afford fuel, not just for our homes, but for our vehicles. We're having a hard time, and that's not just because of inflation, but it's because of added costs and fees, like the low carbon fuel standard, for instance. And I understand the Climate Commitment Act, but some of the policy within that is going to demand that we go all electric in more than one way, not just with our cars, but getting rid of natural gas. And I do feel like there can be some regional consideration when we don't have the transportation available like they do in King County. Or
Ms. Barnard, sorry. I guess
I'm so sorry.
Ran out of time.
Okay.
We might have time to get to another topic,
Okay.
and I'll let you go there. But Mr. Gittner, I want to make sure that you get a chance to answer that. Biggest challenge facing the 8th District here?
I think our biggest challenge is energizing our commercial world here so that some of these problems you just mentioned do not occur. We have over 1,000 PhDs in this community. We have a tremendous science and technology background. We have excellent educational facilities. And we also have the talents and skills among our populations to become kind of the energy capital of the world. And what I mean by that is developing new sources of energy, such as nuclear or whatever. I don't think windmills and shutting our dams down are going to solve the problems, or even building solar panels. But we have this tremendous opportunity, in my opinion, with the advances being made in science and technology to really bring in some really state-of-the-art technologies, family wage-paying jobs, and that type of thing, to really make this area boom. We can't depend forever on $3 billion a year from the federal government to clean Hanford up. We need to get that done and move on to bigger and better things. We have a tremendous space exploration program underway. We need to be a part of that.
All right, and then real quickly, I'm going to do another one. I just want to ask more questions, spend more time with you folks. This one is sort of we talked about the challenges. I want to hear about what the successes will be. Where are the issues where you think that state legislators can reach across the aisle and agree? Where can things get done, particularly in this upcoming legislative session? Mr. Gettner, I'll let you start with this one with a 1 minute time.
Well, we'll have to reach across the aisle and get along with these people and work with them. As famous House Speaker Sam Rayburn once said, to get along, got to go along, or to go along, you got to get along. So that's where you start, with making friendships, with finding common issues to do this with. And once you do that, then you can start addressing the issues that are out there, the problems. You can also start looking at the causes of the problems and how best to solve those problems from a legislative standpoint. We are capable of doing that. The people in Eastern Washington are kind of outnumbered, of course, as you know, both in the legislature and the Senate. But we can make inroads, and we can convert people to our way of thinking, which I think is the common sense constitutional way of thinking, and we can make some great strides in those areas, particularly with economic opportunity, commercial advancement. You know, take Pasco, for example. It's a hub of many, many different types of transportation. And the Port of Pasco is doing a tremendous job in getting some new industry in here. We need to continue that throughout the Tri-Cities. All
right, Mr. Gettner, thank you very much. Mr. Barnard, same question to you, because we talk about so many maybe hyper-partisan issues at things like this. What are the issues that are going to get done in your mind that we can reach across the aisle and work together?
Well, I'm reminded, as you mentioned that, of Matt Boehnke's manufacturing bill from last session, which was unanimously, I mean, when do you see that? I can't remember the last time I saw something completely unanimous that was that significant. And it's the goal to double our manufacturing in the state. And I do feel that that's achievable, but it's going to take a lot of work to get there. So while that bill created a goal, and also part of the Department of Commerce is going to be brought in to help achieve that goal, I do think that's going to take a lot of bipartisan support to actually get there. The other thing I see, which didn't necessarily happen last session, but I'm hoping for changes this session, is in transportation and the transportation package. There really was no input from the Republican side of the aisle, which has traditionally not been the case. It has been a bipartisan effort in the past. And last year it wasn't. The Republicans didn't even get invited to the table, which is a concern, but I know we can change that, and I know that we can be brought back to that table. We need to have a voice in the Tri-Cities for our transportation infrastructure packages, and so it's high time we make those changes and reach back across the aisle.
All right, Ms. Barnard, thank you very much. Mr. Gettner, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate this, being here in person on the WSU Tri-Cities campus. That does it for our coverage of this race, Representative Position 1 in Washington's 8th Legislative District. And that brings us now to the Position 2 race in the 8th, the race that will see a fresh face in the position regardless of who comes out ahead. Joining me here now are April Connors and Joe Cotta, the top two vote getters in a very tight primary in that race during the summer. Now we're starting with opening statements here, 90 seconds for each of you, and we begin alphabetically, and we had to go a few letters in, but figured out that is you, Ms. Connors. Let's get your 90-second opening statement.
Absolutely. I'm April Connors. I grew up in the Tri-Cities. I'm super happy and excited to be running for office here. I have 4 kids. 2 of them are in public school, 2 of them in college. My husband is a 3rd-generation farmer in the Columbia Basin. They've been farming potatoes, wheat, and apples and onions for a long time. I've been active in our local schools, in the PTO, and supporting the arts industry, promoting local and small businesses. I am a businesswoman by trade. I am a real estate agent, and I have been selling homes in the Tri-Cities for over 22 years, helping people with their American dream. I grew up here again. I'm super proud to call it my home. I am running for office because I believe in citizen government. I believe in giving back to our community, and I believe in leaving our community a better place than what we find it. And I have some great endorsements. I have our former Congressman Doc Hastings, who has endorsed the campaign, as well as 8 sitting state legislators. I have the Kennewick Fire Department and the Washington Fraternal Order of Police, as well as our local Fraternal Order of Police endorsing. I have been focused a lot on housing and public safety, our energy within the Tri-City area, and education and economy. And I have spent the last 9 months in the community learning about all of those things and meeting with various officials and public leaders and citizens to learn what I can do to help the Tri-Cities and be effective when I go to Olympia.
All right, Ms. Connors, thank you very much. Mr. Cotta, thank you for being here as well. Let's hear your 90-second opening statement, sir.
My family immigrated from Portugal and started planting grapevines in California in the 1970s. And that's how I grew up. I grew up on my dad's vineyard. And I got educated in California. I got my plant science degree at Fresno State, my master's degree in horticulture at UC Davis. And I married my high school sweetheart. And we moved to the Tri-Cities in 2009. We have 5 kids, 18, 16, 13, 13, and 12. And so we're we're a big household. I manage 1,000 acres that borders the west side of the Hanford property. I'm a vineyard manager. I'm also involved in ministry. I'm the pastor of a new small church in Prosser. I think we just went through our 8th service, so we're pretty brand new there too, and things are going well there. I'm running to empower law enforcement. I'm running to restore and protect our individual liberties, religious liberty, medical freedom, gun rights, election integrity, and the ability to influence our kids' education, school choice. And I'm running to support small businesses and farms. I'm a farmer. And so I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cotta, Ms. Connors, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time, 4 kids, 5 kids, even for this program. I appreciate you taking the time here. Yeah, there you go. Wow. Well, let's get to our list of questions, since we better get them in and out of here. 4 of them provided by the League of Women Voters of Benton and Franklin counties. Now, the last couple of election cycles, one of the big topics has, of course, been elections. And question 1 has to do with ranked choice voting, something that may be brought to the 2023 legislative session as it was in 2022. So the question now, Ms. Connors, for you is, describe your understanding of ranked choice voting, and would you be for or against it?
I'm not for ranked choice or choice voting. I think it is confusing for voters. I think if you have 4 people on the ballot, and like we did in our race in August, and you have pick your number 1 person, pick your number 2 person, pick your 3rd and 4th person, and then all of a sudden it causes more work for our local auditors. They have to go back and then decide who got the most votes and who got second most votes. And I think it's confusing for our voters. I know that a lot of people are interested in it because it helps with the underdog race, and it doesn't help with the strong political parties like the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. But I do think it would cause a lot of confusion for the voters and maybe not bring the outcome that the voters want to see.
And so, the follow-up question to that, and we'll move over to Mr. Cotta for this one. It's not as much about election integrity here, which I know is something you brought up, but election process. So ranked choice voting, what are your thoughts on it, and would you support it?
I don't support it. It seems like a good way to get someone elected that no one party prefers. And so, what you're essentially doing is, the bottom person drops out, and then the person who voted for that candidate, their second place voter, essentially gets a vote. And so I don't like it. I do think it's confusing. I do think it can be overwhelming to the voter. And I like a process where there's at least one party that highly prefers the candidate that gets elected.
And there's a bit of a test case out there, too, if anybody's curious. It's been implemented in the state of Alaska, so if you want to see how it's going, I guess they can be sort of a test for Washington State. Well, question 2, and bringing some context to this topic, according to the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, there are almost 23,000 homeless here in the state of Washington, and that's the 5th most of any state, despite Washington ranking 13th in overall population. So the question then is a little more simple. What legislation would you support or initiate to try to mitigate the homelessness issue in the state? Mr. Cotta, you first.
Yes, right now we have no detox centers. I think I mentioned last time in our interview my work with U-Turn for Christ, and so we'll get calls for people who are either homeless or leaving the jail that have nowhere to go, and sometimes they're high. They've been on meth or whatever they've been taking, and they haven't slept for a week. and they need a detox center to go to before they can enter a halfway house or whatever program that's available that they're going into. And so we need more detox centers. We could even have a center that allows people to detox, get job training, get leadership skills, and then have occupational services that get them back and employed into the culture, into the community. And so those things are really good. You know, ultimately, making hard drugs illegal is part of that issue. A lot of these guys don't want the services because of their addiction to fentanyl. And so that's something we have to take care of on the other end of that.
All right, Mr. Cotta, thank you very much. Ms. Connors, same question to you. What would legislation look like to mitigate homelessness in the state?
Sure, I think as well, I have spent some time with the people that are running or trying to put up the Benton County Recovery Center. I think that is also a very, very important thing we need in our community. I think when we talk about homelessness, we're talking about a cycle. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about drugs. We're talking about a cycle that keeps repeating itself. So in order to, I think our state needs to be focused more on having places like the Benton County Recovery Center, Benton Franklin Recovery Center, where people can go and actually get help and start working on their issues and problems. And I would support that very much. I've been on 4 police ride-alongs with law enforcement officers. I have seen what's going on in our streets. I have seen people that are camping out. I have been in both the Benton and Franklin County jails. I have witnessed in the Franklin County jail a gentleman that should not have been there. And he had been there for a week, and he was causing, you know, chaos. And he was, the jailers were having to clean out his cell, you know, constantly. But he shouldn't have been there, and that's what they said too. He had a mental health problem, not a problem that should have been associated with going to jail, but it had to do with drugs and as well. And so I do think working on our recovery centers, legislation to try to get more of those in place, and actually helping people try to get better than why just push them through a system. So.
All right, well, thank you very much, Ms. Connors. So question 3 now, and we just asked our candidates in the position 1 race this same question, and now we bring it to you. What legislation would you support or introduce regarding immigration? And as part of your answer, what changes, if any, would you make to the E-Verify system? Ms. Connors, we'll start with you.
Well, when we talk about immigration, I think a lot of that is handled at our federal level, which we obviously have some problems with right now. You know, our borders are not secure. We are seeing a lot of drugs come across our borders because of that. When we go to other countries, at least when I go to another country, I have a thing called a passport, and I do not go to a country illegally. And so I think it's really important that we actually have a more secure system. Immigration's putting a lot of pressure onto our, not only drugs, but onto our system for social care and social work and health care that is costing our state a lot of money. Probably not as much as the border states, but we are still seeing that effect here in Washington state.
And with the 45 seconds left, just the second part of the question was about the E-Verify system. Can you kind of describe your knowledge of that? And how
I honestly do not have a ton of knowledge about the E-Verify system, something I would like to learn about. Again, a lot of this that we're talking about right now is federal and not necessarily as related to the state of Washington, but I would like to learn more.
Great. Ms. Connors, thank you very much. Mr. Cotta, same question to you. What would legislation on immigration look like here in Washington state?
It does need federal support first. And so you're looking at closing the border, and then we can start to work within the confines of what we have remaining. As far as E-Verify goes, we use it, it's available. It's just verifying the legal status of the employee. And so the problem comes when we start wanting to make E-Verify mandatory or penalizing businesses if they don't use it. And that's pretty hard to do if borders are open and we don't have any regulatory help from the government with that regard. And so I like E-Verify, but I wouldn't want to make it mandatory until we get an immigration policy that works federally.
All right, Ms. Cotta, thank you very much. Now, a final question from the league, and we'll listen to the time here to see if we can get a little more conversation going. But I like this question because it makes you ask one to yourselves here. Certainly, you've all prepared for this. You've both participated in primary candidate forums here, as well as being here with us now, of course. So you've come prepared. Is there any question that hasn't been asked of you, maybe in this or any forum, that you have been ready to answer that you wish was asked of you, or a topic basically of your choosing? Mr. Cotta, I'll let you go first here.
You know, it might just be within the confines of what we think the greatest need for need that we see in our communities. I think all of us are searching pretty hard for the truth. I see a lot of division because we disagree on a lot of premises, when really the goal and what we want is really kind of aimed in the same direction. And so those things are tough. You know, I was reading part of the Communist Manifesto when I was preparing a weekly newsletter early over the weekend, and you see a lot of those things happening here. Well, there seems to be attacks on family divisions, or attacks on the family, attacks on capitalism, attacks on just even, you know, between men and women. There's all these kinds of sources of division that we see going on in our culture. And they violate family bonds, and they create problems where they create more reliance on the government. And those are the things that I think are probably the most important things we have to face right now. If we don't fight tyranny, none of the other issues are going to matter. And so when we see issues with health mandates, and right now, you know, state workers needing to be vaccinated, having that requirement, we need freedom. If we don't have medical freedom, we don't have freedom. And so those are things that are most important to me. It's defending our constitutional liberties, and it's understanding our discernment that ultimately we are corruptible. We need a checks and balance system, and we need accountability in every level of process that we adhere to in government or otherwise.
Mr. Cotta, thank you very much. And I know these are sort of serving as pseudo-closing statements here, but Ms. Connors, maybe I like to reword the question every once in a while. It's what's something we aren't talking about enough when you go to these forums?
Sure, and we've had a lot of different questions about a lot of different things. One of the things that really hasn't been brought up a lot, which I think is like a big piece in the room, is inflation. And we haven't gotten into a lot of our interviews, like what's happening with inflation. Again, I know a lot of inflation can be partly a federal issue, but we are seeing the highest gas prices. They went up again this week. We have a 50-cent gas tax. We have one of the highest gas taxes in Washington State. We're struggling at the grocery store. I don't know about you guys, but my son likes cereal. And when a box of cereal is now $4.97 a box, it's incredibly expensive. You know, talking about inflation and as well as economic development is another big piece of it. We had an opportunity in the Washington State Legislature to give some tax relief in this last session. As a matter of fact, they had $15 billion they could have done something with that could have helped our local community and the people who need it the most. They could have taken away, had a gas tax hiatus for a little while. They could have had an excise tax hiatus. They could have had a sales tax hiatus for a day. And none of that happened in our last legislative session. So I think first and foremost on everyone's mind right now is inflation and how much everything costs and how they're going to get by, from housing to gas to food to resources.
Well, thank you so much. Really thoughtful answers. I mentioned it would go quick, and it certainly did. So we appreciate your time here today. April Connors, Joe Cotta, candidates for the position 2 seat in Washington's 8th Legislative District. And we want to say thank you to all of our candidates that made it for today's program. Now, a quick reminder, the 2022 general election is on Tuesday, November 8th. The 18-day voting period for mail-in ballots begins Friday, October 21st. If you still need to register, you can do it online up until October 31st, but you can register in person all the way up to Election Day. Now, NWPB's Vote 2022 coverage continues throughout Thursday this week, including a number of Benton and Franklin County races. But be sure to tune in tomorrow. Our next program looks at a pair of races in the 16th Legislative District, 2 more House of Representatives seats, each with an incumbent and a fresh challenger. If you'd like to watch this program in full, we will have this and all of our debates this week available at nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.